Welcome to the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. I'm Becca, a holistic life coach, mom of two, wife, and business owner. This is a podcast where we will have conversations and coaching around all things strategy and healing that supports both who you are and what you do. So grab your iced coffee or whatever weird health beverage you are currently into, and let's do the damn thing. What is your job as a mom? No, really, have you ever slowed down and asked yourself what your roles and responsibility are when it comes to motherhood? What are you and aren't you responsible for? What do you control and what is outside of your control? What are your values as a parent? And here's the thing. This is why I am so passionate about the way that I do what I do. When I set out to create the Motherhood Mentor, I knew that I didn't want to create a space that was about parenting. It was about the parent. It was not about the action and giving you a toolkit of how to parent. It was enabling you to embody who you want to be as a parent. Because in my own journey, how I parent, the way that I show up, doesn't just come from me having practical ideas of what to do. It comes from being in alignment with my values. It comes from being centered in who I am and what I believe and how I want to move in this relationship with my kids, with my husband, as a family. It came from me getting really clear about what I thought and how I felt and what was good for me and not good for me, and being able to parent from this embodied place of being aware of my own nervous system and what I was up to. And I call it parenting from leadership because instead of looking at my parenting and always looking at my kids and their outcome to be the biggest informant of how I'm doing as a mother, I am looking at my behavior as a leader. I am looking at my family and my parenting and my motherhood as a job, job. Like, it is a role that I am playing that will change. My role and my job title as mom is consistently changing based on the season I'm in, based on the season my kids are in. You know, as they get older, how I approach them, how I lead them, how I parent them is changing. And that's why it's been so healthy and helpful for me to, I mean, don't get like, okay, motherhood is a part of my identity. Being a mom is a part of who I am. It has fundamentally changed me on every level that there is. And how I show up to that role is formed by how I show up to me and who I am and how I handle conflict and how I communicate and my emotional maturity and health. It's my boundaries. It's my nervous system regulation. It's how I handle when I'm dysregulated, how I handle when I'm overwhelmed and overstimulated and angry and tired and sad. What does my parenting role look like when I'm still in touch with the fact that I'm fundamentally human? That me being a mother does not trump the fact that I am a human mammal who has an animal body that at the end of the day has just as much need and desire and dysregulation and wanting things and not wanting things as my kids do. And I want my kids to actively see me modeling the kind of life that I hope for them. And that doesn't just mean on the good days and in the good things. That's on the bad days and in the bad things and in the hard things and in weird, messy relationships and boundaries and work and success and failure and celebration and learning how to navigate faith and religion and relationships and sex and our bodies and health and food and friends and drama and bullies. And it's like, this shit is complex. Like, we so often take on this belief that we have to give like, I had this belief for so long that I needed to give my kids this like perfect handbook. And then I needed to have it figured out for them when I don't even have it figured out for me. And I don't mean that. And like, that's not actually a disparaging, awful thought for me. Like, that's very freeing that I get to give my kids permission to be human and also to like do it really well, while also being a complete screw up, but not holding shame around that. Like, what is your job as a mom? Are you holding the responsibility of making your kids happy? I think if you asked so many moms, like, what's your goal as a mom? What's your job as a mom? It's like, oh, to make my kids happy or healthy. And I've had the rug pulled out of me enough in motherhood. And I am honored, absolutely honored that I have been able to witness the rug being pulled out of other women's lives, because I know that you can be a really fucking incredible mom and your kid might not be happy. Your kid might not be healthy. You might do all of the right things to the best of your ability. And at the end of the day, it might not work. It's, people aren't formulas. And when we make ourselves or our kids these formulas of, if I just do it right, they'll turn out this certain way, we're setting ourselves up for massive amounts of perfectionism and shame. And when I was in early motherhood, I was just obsessed with learning how to consciously, gently parent, how to do attachment parenting. And I witnessed in myself, it makes me laugh now. My daughter hit this phase where I remember in my head thinking, gentle parenting isn't working. It has made her no more gentle than she used to be. like, like gentle parenting is not making her more gentle. It's not fixing her. It's not making her have any less fits. It's not making her listen. It's not making her calm. It's not fixing her tantrums. And I don't remember what it was. I don't remember an aha moment. I don't remember if I heard it somewhere or I saw it somewhere or if I figured it out on my own. But I look back and giggle now because like gentle parenting or conscious parenting or attachment parenting or any style of parenting was never about changing her behavior. It was about changing my behavior. It was about owning my behavior. And that concept was never something that I remember thinking about until I became a parent, of how I parent is not about controlling or changing my child's behavior and making them behave or making them fall in line or follow rules. It's about making sure that my behavior reflects my values of who I want to be. That to me is leadership. When I think of self-leadership, life leadership, business leadership, leadership on teams, it is, are you showing up? Are you behaving and relating to this person in a way that at the end of the day, on the good days and the bad days, you're saying, I showed up according to my values, according to what I care about, who I want to be, what I want to be about. And that doesn't mean perfection either. That means when I mess up, am I taking ownership? When I am out of line, am I staying egotistical and blaming it on someone else? Am I owning my needs and my emotions and my values and not putting that on my children? It is not my children's job to make me happy. It's not my children's job for them to be happy so that I can be happy, or for them okay to be okay. Like, my job as a mom, what I've decided as a mom is that, like, my job is to make sure that I take care of me so well that they have a parent who they can rely on, that they can depend on, who is never perfect, but steadily showing up for herself. And not just solo showing up for myself, but also consistently and continually relying on other people who love me. I hope they see a mom who doesn't do it all or have it all together, but a mom who's consistently showing up to herself, who is being vulnerable and getting help, who is working through hard emotions and relationships, who has questions and answers, and who shows up. Those are my values. That's my job. I have to continually remind myself, what is right relationship to my kids look like in this season, because it changes. The older my kids get, I have to reevaluate. Am I over parenting? My my genetic makeup, whatever it is, my preference, my fixations, I love Enneagram, because I think Enneagram gives us so much powerful language around our unconscious, what's driving our behaviors. And for me, I have a tendency to overparent. I have a tendency to have my head up people's asses and trying to control and fix them so that I can be okay. And I have to be aware of when I'm doing that. And I have to pay attention to their input. And, I have to look at, okay, the way that I'm relating to them, is it working? Not in this formulaic, if I do this, then it makes you relate in this way that I like. It's, am I showing up to you and leading you in a way that's actually helpful for you? Am I teaching you and leading you and setting up enough boundaries, but also enough grace and enough space for you to learn to mess up, to be human, to have emotions, to be figuring things out, right? Like, a perfect example of this, I have a very strong-willed, spicy child. And I, from the beginning of motherhood, was like, I want my children to know themselves. I want them to feel their agency. I want them to feel in their bodies that they can say no to people, that they can fight. I do not want them to feel like they are a victim. I want to empower them to use their voice, to feel like they get to be themselves, to like what they like and say no when they want to say no, and speak their voice. And guess where your kids are going to practice that? They're going to practice that with you. And this is just like being totally honest. That still triggers the hell out of me. Like, my values are like, I am so proud of you. I want you to use your voice, but like, can you practice it on like the authority of like the teacher at school, not me? Right? Because, my values is teaching my kids that they need to be respectful to authority, but also that like authority doesn't give people privilege to play God over my kids' lives. Like, my kids have just as much access to dignity and God as an adult does. And so adults don't get to disrespect my kids either. And I have taught my kids, just because an adult tells you something doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean you have to listen, doesn't mean you have to fall in line. I want you to question things. I want you to use your own brain and your own heart. And I want you to listen to God. I want you to go to God for the answers, not just some person who told you that they have more access to wisdom or knowledge or spirit than you do. And they sure did learn that, and they practice it on me. And there's parts of me that don't like that. I'm like, no, just listen, just obey, just do what I say. Don't ask questions. Don't push back. And that's hard. And I'm like, okay, but that's in line with leadership. I'm willing. Are you parenting from a way that's showing up to the hard, good things? Or are you parenting in a way that you're avoiding all of the hard things and it's making it harder? What is your responsibility and what is not? so many parents, I really do think mothers have not built up a thick skin for our own emotions. And so then when our kids have big emotions, we have no thick skin for it. So we don't have the backbone and the resilience to protect our soft hearts. Or there's moms who have overly solidified their boundaries and their sturdiness, and then they've lost their softness and their nurturing with their kids. And we haven't become these well-rounded, well-balanced humans. And when you're not a well-balanced, well-rounded human, emotionally, spiritually, physically, relationally, not just in like the gooey fun, how we connect, but also in play, also in caretaking, but also in conflict, in high moments of tension, in emotion, in conflict resolution, in not just how do we rupture well, but how do we repair the rupture? How do we prepare our children for the reality that even the healthiest, best relationships are going to have sticky shit that happens? My kids are not going to grow up in a fairy tale. I didn't grow up in a fairy tale. None of us grew up in a fairy tale. And yet I think we keep perpetuating this fairy tale like motherhood, or like the role of motherhood can somehow be pretty and easy. And don't get me wrong, I have a lot of ease in motherhood, but I'm also willing to show up for the hard shit. So what is your job? What's your job as a mom? What roles are you taking on? And I think it's also really powerful to say, early on in my coaching, I haven't gotten this more recently, but early on in my coaching, when I would be asking moms, well, what are you struggling with in motherhood? And an answer I got really frequently? I'm really struggling with keeping my house clean. And okay, obviously there's extremes where, and they are connected. If you are the primary caretaker of your home, or if you feel responsible for that, I see how they're connected. So I'm not saying they're not connected. And I'm like, the way that you're parenting your children is, I see it as a very different role than your household. Now, those two roles work together, right? Like they go together hand in hand. But like at the end of the day, I prioritize my role as mother over my role as housekeeper. Like I even have the joke lately of like, um, I'm actually better at taking care of my house now than I was even before I worked when I was a stay-at-home mom, because of the way that I've learned to manage my time and my attention and my energy and my ADHD, all of those good things. When did our houses looking like these perfect Pinterest boards become like the pinnacle of good motherhood? I have known so many women over my lifetime, both pre and in coaching, who their mothers kept a beautiful, glorious, gorgeous home, and they had the most toxic, awful relationship to their mothers because their mothers prioritize the home over them. And I'm not saying that's all mothers. I'm not saying that if you have a clean house, you're that. And it's so important to look at what are the different aspects and variables of your role. For example, have you overcoupled having a clean home being synonymous with being a good mom? Because you can be a really good mom and have a really clean home. But there has been times in my life, even still in my current life, where there are days where I have such low capacity that it's like, I can either be a really good mom and connect with my kids or spend time with them or, show up to the actual parenting, or I can have a clean house and I'll choose my kids. And there's times when I realize, okay, me feeling good as a human being or as a mom today looks like doing the laundry, looks like cleaning. The roles work together, but it's not always like an A plus B equals C equation. So if you're struggling with your job as a mom, I really encourage you, get out a notebook and pen and write down, what is your job? What is your job? What do you feel responsible for with your kids? What are your values as a person? What are the things that you hope to teach your kids? What are the ways that you want to see them perceiving life or adulthood or relationship? And don't just think about quote unquote good things, happy things. Also think about hard things, right? Because yeah, part of quote unquote being a good mom for me is connection and play and spending time with my kids, but it's also like being there, showing up, taking care of myself. Like, what do those things look like? What is your story around being a good mom or a bad mom? Where do you judge other moms and where do you envy other moms? It's so fascinating how hand in hand envy and judgment can go in motherhood. And I highly encourage you, think about the moms that like there's kind of almost for a lot of times for women, there'll be like this like low level disgust or judgment around women they actually envy. And a lot of times we'll push ourselves away from that because we haven't given ourselves permission to get curious around what it is we do or don't like about it. Like, I'm trying to think. Oh, I know I have so many good examples of this in my own life because I used to be a super judgmental person. Not openly. I've always been very, very nice openly, but internally, I used to judge a lot. And I use the word judge purposefully because I was constantly in this game of comparison of other women being better than me. I would have never back in that season used the language of comparison or judgment because I was constantly seeing how they were better than me. Um, but again, it would have me losing context because I'd be pedestalizing this person where I'm not seeing them clearly and I'm not seeing myself clearly. Like comparison, I think for so long makes us lose perspective. And now when I notice judgment or envy, or I notice myself comparing to other women, whether it's, social media or Pinterest or business or success or whatever, I use that as a sign and a signal to get curious, to lean into what is it I like and want, and what is it I don't want? Because some people have qualities that like, I don't want, I'm not interested in that. And like, that's just information for how to live out my values, how to live out my life, my motherhood, my relationships of like, oh, you know what? Like, that's not my flavor. Like, I love mint Oreo ice cream. It's like one of my favorite things in the world. It's so freaking good. My husband hates mint. Like, he literally thinks it's the most disgusting thing ever. That's just information. Like, that's a judgment. That's a comparison. But we don't have all of this drama around, like, what kind of ice cream do you like? That's just information that when I go to the ice cream shop, I don't buy my husband mint Oreo ice cream, but I do buy it for me. So when you're looking at your parenting, when you're looking at the decisions that you make as a mother, where your kids are going to go to school, what sports they're going to play, give yourself permission to change your mind. The only reason those things matter, the only reason those decisions matter is because you matter and your kids matter. I, when my kids were really little, I was very into, like the birth scene, I guess you could say. I don't really know how else to say that, but, I had home births and I had home birth midwives and I was a La Leche League leader. So I did lots of like breastfeeding support groups. I nursed my kids for a long time and I was very passionate about those choices for me. Because back when I was making them, I had a small community where that felt normal. But I also, my main community, the main community that I identified with, I was very countercultural. The decisions I was making, like even simple, silly little things of like, I wasn't sleep training, and the way that I was treated and shamed, and like weirdly passive aggressively, people would make comments that like were probably somewhat well-intentioned, somewhat judgmental, depending on who it was coming from, around the choices I was and wasn't making as a parent. I look back at all of those things, and I had the beautiful opportunity where I was helping other moms with breastfeeding. And what I loved about the training and the mentorship I got for helping these other moms, it was not about the choices, you know, and they had all of these experts telling them what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And every call I got on with these moms, it wasn't about breastfeeding. It wasn't about bottle feeding. It wasn't about weaning. It was about, can she trust herself and feel in her intuition what she needs and then honor it? Can she witness what her baby needs and then balance this tension of what she needs versus what the baby needs, and making decisions from a place as a leader? And I don't think women are empowered to be that. I think so often the power is given to experts, to coaches, to parenting experts, to therapists, to doctors, to whoever. And my heart has always been to bring back the authority and the leadership to you, to you. The reason these things matter is because you and your baby matter. And I think we live in a world of so much information that it feels almost impossible. It feels like we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, about all of these choices that feel so fucking big when you're making them, right? Like where you birth, how you birth, drug-free, drugged up, C-section, bottle feeding, breastfeeding, co-sleeping, not co-sleeping, sleep training, daycare, no daycare, vaccines, no vaccines, school, private school, homeschool, charter school, reading, technology, tablets. And those are just the decisions we make when they're toddlers. Timeouts, how we do and do not compliment them, how they drink their water, if they can drink water at night, how they brush their teeth. It's like, it's so overwhelming. There's so much information about the role of motherhood. Like, it's such a trip. It's so crazy to me. Like, no wonder moms are not in touch with our instinct. There's too much information outside of us. And all of that becomes so simple when you tune back into the information that's coming from inside of you. The information that's coming from the fact that you are a wise, intuitive, intelligent being. And that's not something that you can lose or gain. It's something that is who you are. It's in the dignity of your bones. Like, you can't add worth or detract worth from who you are. I believe that to my core. It's a hill that I will die on. You are worthy simply because you exist. You are matter. You are matter. You take up space. You have thoughts, you have feelings, and you are an expert on you. And when you become an expert on you, when you start owning and taking responsibility and leadership of yourself, that's what enables you and empowers you in the role of leadership with your kids, in the role of parenting. So if you want to look at the job of parenting, for me, it has changed everything to look at parenting as a leadership role. My job as a mom is a leadership role. It's a role that is deeply ingrained in relationship and my values. And yes, there's tons of actionable choices. There's a massive, never-ending to-do list. But I think this view of motherhood changes too, because I no longer see this to-do list and think, there's somehow a way that I can finish it, that I can accomplish it. It's an ongoing relating. It's an ongoing role that will constantly shift and change, but it's a lifelong one. I'm never going to be done. I'm never going to have it made as a mom. I'm never going to have it all figured out. I'm not going to be able to cross off this checklist. There will always be something new. And that's why, as mothers, we cannot look at motherhood or taking care of the home or parenting our kids as once I'm done. You can't be at the bottom of that to-do list because you're never going to reach the bottom of the to-do list. This is just life. It's just living. It's constant and continual, and that can feel overwhelming until we remember that so is ritual. The seasons change and move, and it's always ongoing. And yet we have seasons of slow, and we have seasons of play, and we have seasons of sun, and we have seasons of cold. And our roles and our jobs are going to change and shift and evolve as we do, as our kids do. This was my first of probably many podcasts where I just let myself kind of go off on a topic. I'm so curious to know where it lands with you. If you had aha moments, if you had questions, please share this. Please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you how this resonated with you. And if you want to see more podcasts like this, and I'd love to know what topics you want to see. So send me a DM, send me an email on topics of motherhood that you want to hear more about. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for hanging out today on the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. If you loved today's episode, share it with a friend or tag me in your stories on Instagram so that we can connect. Take up audacious space in your life, and I'll see you next time.